Live and in color from the NBC News radio broadcasting studios of KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, and 106.5 FM, located in beautiful Southern California, and in parallel from the Turfs Up radio studio in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Thanks for tuning in to the Water Zone Show this evening.
Well, a pleasant afternoon, and welcome everybody to the Water Zone Show. I'm your host, Rob Starr, along with my best host, Mr. Chris Davey, and he's out in Southern California. And I wonder how hot he's doing out there. Chris, is it warm there?
Yeah, not as good, not as warm as we were. Our week high, or the past 2 weeks actually, the high has been 112. So today, not quite there, but above 100, in the mid 100s right now. And glad to be back on the air, Rob, because we missed the show. We had a week off last week as Thursday fell on the 4th of July, so I got through that safely down here. How about you?
Yeah, it was really pleasant, nice, and we sat out in our backyard by the pool and watched the fireworks. It was incredible. Warm weather. It was very warm weather, and I think I told you I have a chiller on my pool, so when the pool gets to be 90 degrees just from the sunlight, I turn the chiller on, and in a matter of a couple hours, it drops at about 10 to 15 degrees, so it's nice. But it was pleasant, had a great, safe time, and everything is going good. Miss Austin, who's up there in the northern part of Central California, how's she doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. It's hot up here, 111 degrees, but, laying low, staying indoors. Very, very hot. This is going to be the story of the summer, the hot temperatures. This is the third heat wave that we've had up in this area, and we're just, in the beginning of July. The real dog days of summer come in August and September. So it's going to be a big one, a big hot one. And there's impacts. We're just starting to talk about those impacts, but one of those is going to be in your grocery aisles. You can't bake farm country and not have impacts to that. And so it's going to be reduced yields and crop failures, and that's going to result in higher food prices, no doubt. And plus, just the toll on the human body, the death toll from this heat wave is going to be. It will be amazing to see the number when we get there, but it's already at 28. So it's these hot temperatures are nothing to fool around with.
Absolutely not.
That's for sure.
Well, you're right. You're right about the agriculture. We bought some fruit trees that we planted a couple months back, and I was showing Chris Davey a couple months ago the first crop we had off of it. It was they're little miniature peaches. They were really, really good. But we noticed the leaves now are, because of the heat and the sun on it, it just burns them. So we bought a little, 6 foot by 4 foot pop-up to stick on top of it. But it's hurting all the other trees in the yard too. I mean, it's just hot. It's burning, and you see all these crispy leaves. So you're right. I can understand why crops are going to be bad.
And the climate impacts are are really changing agriculture. I mean, you can get a little pop-up tent and put it over your tree, but if you're a farmer out in the field, nothing you can do about that. And it's changing. It's starting to change. Will continue to change what crops we can grow where. Another big story that's not often talked about are how the nighttime temperatures are raising as well. It's almost in some cases the nighttime temperatures are higher in relative to the daytime temperatures. And the chill time at night, that's important for a lot of crops. And if you don't have a chill time, then you're not going to have produce. We have our tomato plants take a nap when it gets really, really hot. It's interesting up here. They just stall. we have green tomatoes on the plants, and the tomatoes stay green. The plants, if you keep them watered, stay alive, but they don't start to ripen the tomatoes until the temperature gets below, I think, 70 degrees at night for a certain amount of period of time. And that's very difficult when that heat persists into the night. And, so that's going to change crops and where we can grow things. It's already been affecting things up here, especially in terms of the winter time, because there are also crops or trees, orchards that need a good solid freeze, some really good cold weather. And when the winters get warmer, that causes some problems. And cherries are a crop that are dwindling here in California because the climate is changing, and they're just not able to grow them as much anymore. So, we'll see. Things are a changing.
Yes, they are.
It's not just temperature, Chris, either. I mean, certainly temperature is a leading indicator, right? But
sure.
Those warmer temperatures, they affect the weather all over the place, and you've got some places that aren't used to wetter summers or wetter winters, and they're getting floods instead. And that's you mentioned that's going to affect what crops we can and can't grow, and where and when we grow those crops. Certainly affected by other issues, and then there's the human factor as well, right? All the millions and millions, if not billions of people affected by these changes in the weather.
Oh, it's awesome. Mr. Davey was kind enough to send me an article about a company in Sweden. I think we pronounced it correctly, called Yase. And I made contact with them, and they're supposed to get back to us and see if we can get them on the show. They're 9 hours difference from us, but they have a bunch of vertical farms, meaning in warehouses. And they use AI, and it's fully automated. They do the lighting, the temperature, the whole thing. It's not cheap to set it up. It's pretty expensive, but they're being very successful in their I'll call them their farms. They have their building farms. So hopefully we'll get them on. So what's new and important that we should know this week, Chris, about water?
Well, we're really having some difficulties in the San Joaquin Valley when it's coming to implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. This is very difficult because since we had this legislation passed, it's been 10 years, these groundwater basins have to be managed sustainably. It's kind of like your checking account. You can't overdraw the groundwater basin anymore. And so 10 years in, we're trying to, this is really where the rubber is hitting the road, and we have two groundwater basins now that are on probation, and 4 more that are headed there. And it's getting to be very difficult in having to deal with these issues. These basins, they have to cut back on how much groundwater they pump, which means they have to allocate the groundwater to each farmer what's available. And unfortunately, there's just not enough water for every farmer to have enough to grow a crop. So then you have to sort of barter and trade around. But again, these are tough discussions that have to be had, and we'll see how this is going to shake out. But there's been, we've had a lot of governance issues, I guess we'd say. One agency demanding the entire board of another agency step down, and that agency is defiant. Things are sort of splintering apart when they really need to be coming together. The hardest part for these basins that are on probation is that now they have to start paying fees, and these fees are substantial. $300 a well plus $20 an acre foot, and it's hard for me to guess how many acre feet a farmer might be putting on his crops, but they have to pay, this can run into the tens of thousands of dollars if you have a reasonable sized property. And these fees now have to be paid in addition to the fees for your groundwater agency. So it's like doubling up. And I think it's just very difficult to see. I don't know how this is going to work out. The state board is required to charge fees if they have to come in and put a basin on probation, but these fees are very large, and it's, I guess it's kind of like if you're overdrawn at the bank and, you can't work, and then the bank is charging you more money for being overdrawn, so you have to make up even more money. I mean, it's very difficult to see how this is going to work out. Unfortunately, it has to happen. We have to manage our groundwater basins sustainably. Everybody loses if we take them all down to zero, but getting to this sustainable management is very difficult.
Yeah, that's kind of tough, and I think a lot of farmers are getting hit with these fees, and it's going to terminate a lot of businesses, which this is a shame, because I truly believe farmers are the backbone of this country. And
well, definitely, the challenge is that we just don't have enough water for everyone that wants to have a farm and grow crops here in California. The ones that are the hardest are the ones that are dependent only upon groundwater. Some farmers have surface water rights and groundwater, so they're kind of in better shape. But if you only have groundwater, then you get these like very small water allocations. And, unfortunately, agriculture does need to shrink. I think the estimate is about 1 in 5 acres in the San Joaquin Valley is going to have to come out of production. That's a pretty substantial amount, but that's what it's going to take to get the groundwater basins into balance. And then, and I should also note that there are also farmers that say, well, the problem is you need to send us more surface water. But the surface water farmers that get those, they're not, the surface water is having some problems too. So it's very difficult to be a farmer in the San Joaquin Valley these days.
Oh, absolutely. What's happening with this things about permitted more changes to the amount of water they got to reduce, these water agencies?
Oh, my word. Yes, they finally passed the Making Conservation a California Way of Life regulation, probably the most misunderstood regulation in the media that we have, and it's been this way all along. Yes, this regulation sets efficient water budgets for every water agency in the state that they need to comply with. Now, they need to get their customers to come in and, overall meet these water use objectives, or the agency is the one that will get fined. It's not down to the consumer level. I think this is modeled off of electricity, because we don't want to build more power plants here in California, so we told the electricity folks that they had to reduce the usage. So that was why solar panels became big and, things like that. It's the same thing, but it means that they need to implement programs and coax their customers into using less water. It's not permanent water restrictions, as some like to call it, but it does, mean that you're going to be encouraged to be very efficient with your water use.
Well, I worry about the water agencies because if they don't sell water, they don't make money. Or if they reduce the amount of water that they sell, they reduce the money that they make. They have to keep the operations going every single day. That's an important thing to do. So it's going to be hard to see. I know last time I went to one of the meetings and they had Fiona Sanchez from Irvine Ranch Water, and she says, their agency over the last 15 years have done everything they thought that was asked of them, and they reduced water a lot. And now they're asking to do more. And they said they spent millions just getting to where they are today, and getting down to, I think it's 30 or 35 gallons per day per capita. I think that's the goal. And by 2030, it's going to be tough, but we shall see.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, we gotta go to our commercial break. Chris, it was great having you. I'm glad you had a happy and safe 4th of July, and I know you're heading up to some mountains on the lake this weekend, and hopefully it'll be cooler. I don't know how much cooler, but even if it's 10 degrees cooler, it's probably better than nothing. So we can't wait for that's over, and you have a great time, a safe time, and we'll hear from you next week.
All right. Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, and one more thing, I forgot to tell listeners, hey, you got to go to www.mavensnotebook.com, become a subscriber to Maven's News. It's incredible. And you can also become a sponsor if you want, and you'll get your data and your information every day in the morning when you turn your PC on or laptop or phone or whatever, and you get the prime news before everybody else gets it. And again, I don't know how she does it, but she does it. She must have a bunch of elves working secretly that we don't know about, and all I know is there's 10 million typewriters going and computers to get all this work done, but she does it, and every morning it's there. So go to the website, become a listener and a subscriber, and also try to sign up and be a subscriber. We would appreciate it, and I know she will. So thanks, Chris. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. All right, we're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with a featured guest, so stick around for the second half, and when we come back, you'll hear the voice of Mr. Chris Davey doing the introductions.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda is sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
May through June is a torrential downpour of points. Site One is proud to introduce our exclusive NDS Point Storm 24 event. Partners program members who use drainage, hardscapes, and irrigation products can earn up to 4x the rewards in May and June for purchasing quality NDS products. That's 4x the points on a whole range of product solutions for residential and commercial projects. NDS is a leader in water management solutions and is known for superior quality and performance, as well as ease of installation and extreme durability. You can count on Site One and NDS to help you grow your business. NDS Point Storm 24 from May through June. It's the perfect storm of points and performance.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone. We're going to go straight into our guest today. Her name is Shana Shea, and she is the editor-in-chief for the Water Report. Here we go.
Well, all right, everybody. Welcome back to the second half of the Water Zone radio show. I'm your host, Chris Davey, along with the all-knowing Rob Starr. And as most of you saw from our LinkedIn notice on the Water Network, on the Toro site, on other platforms, we have a great guest for you this week. Her name is Shana Shea. Shana is the owner and the editor-in-chief of a publication and website called The Water Report. She's an accomplished water professional. She spent her career developing her expertise in water policy and management, conservation, and community outreach. And Shana has worked in the public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector. She has a broad range of experience and a very unique perspective on the water industry brought on by all of those years of experience. Just to give you a little bit more, she's most recently worked at an investor-owned utility in the state of Arizona, Rob's home state there. She was a water resource and conservation specialist, and while most of her time has been spent in Arizona, she also spent several years working in Victoria, Australia, as a water market specialist for the government, along with being a consultant. So I'm sure I'm going to ask Shana to share a little bit about that experience with us. And just to round out her creds on the education side there, she has degrees from University of Arizona in environmental and water resource economics, and also international relations and affairs. So Shana Shea, welcome to the Water Zone.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so happy to be here today.
We're glad you're here for sure, and I'm going to let Rob welcome you to the show as well.
Welcome, Shana. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. I'm excited to talk about water.
Good. I hope the conversation flows very good today. I think it will. Anyway, it's just a silly question I always ask our guests. What drew you to water? What made you come to this industry that tingled your mind?
Well, Rob, I was born and raised in the Sonoran Desert in Tucson, Arizona. So I think the water conservation ethic and water scarcity mindset was really programmed into me from the very beginning. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to study environmental issues and water at the University of Arizona. And then after college, I ended up working in the water industry for a water utility, as you mentioned, as a water resources and conservation specialist. And there I got to educate the general public and talk to people about water conservation best practices, and also really take a deep dive into understanding how water is managed in Arizona, which I really, really enjoyed. But I got an opportunity to go to Australia a couple years later and to work for the government of Victoria in water markets. And I was able to learn about a whole new system of managing water. And I'm happy to give a little bit of background on Australian water markets a moment here, just a high level overview. Australia was in a really serious drought, specifically the Murray-Darling Basin, which is very similar in characteristics to the Colorado River Basin, cross interstate boundaries, lots of agricultural use. And in the early 2000s, they were experiencing a very serious drought, which they referred to as the Millennium Drought. So they were trying to tackle this situation. They were really approaching what we now refer to as day zero, where they were really running out of water. And it was getting to the point where they decided to implement a water marketing system. And that meant separating the legal land rights from the legal water rights. The idea being that this would allow water to more easily flow to where it was most needed and highly valued, and to value water in a way that was new. So I was in Australia when I was working there almost exactly 10 years after this new system had gone into place. And I had a chance to work on a report evaluating the effectiveness of these water markets, which was really exciting because that allowed me to really understand the principles of what a good and healthy water market looks like. But after working there for a couple of years, I ended up moving back to Arizona and worked in a water utility again, where I got to do what I love, which is talking to the community and educating people about water. There was obviously a drought that's still going on in the Colorado River Basin, and it was an exciting time because in 2021 there was the Colorado River shortages, which I think really started to engage the general public in water resources and management. And obviously these shortages are still happening today and impacting the Colorado River Basin on the whole. But the whole time that I was working in these different spaces, I continued to be a customer of the Water Report. And I was looking to this publication as my source of information for the big picture in the water industry. And I found it extremely valuable throughout these years. So when I saw that there was a risk that it might stop, I felt the need to step in. I was reading the publication, I think the July issue in 2022, and there was an editor's note from the founders saying that they were looking to retire after 20 years of publishing. And I thought to myself, well, I want to make sure that this continues. And that's how we got to where we are today.
Congratulations to that.
That is fantastic, Shane. I mean, that's a good background, and really attributes to that unique perspective that you're going to bring to the future of the water report, and that you already have for our industry. So talking about the report, water report, just a little bit more, and I know you want this publication to continue, but I'm also going to ask you, as last week you were here in California, where most of our listeners know I reside, and you were at the AWWA conference, ACE 2024. So any comments about that? What did you see? Anything interesting? What was the takeaway for you?
Well, the ACE conference, it was my first time attending, even though I am very active in some of the ACE or some of the AWWA committees in Water Conservation Division and the Water Resources Division. But it was overwhelming and inspiring because there was just so many, there was over 10,000 water professionals coming together to talk about safe drinking water, to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing, but also to discuss solutions. And I have a list of things that we can talk about coming from that were discussed during the ACE conference, like PFAS and lead, also digital transformation and how we're using technology to address some of the data challenges and explore how we can leverage that data better moving forward. But in all, I would say that the ACE conference was a great experience. I think a lot of conferences, the best part is talking to people, in the quote hallways, hearing people's stories about how they got involved in water and why they're so passionate. And I am very optimistic in a lot of ways about how we can address these challenges that we are facing, which we all know are quite large. But there are so many smart people working to make this better and to fix these situations that we're facing and moving forward, like global and climate change and water scarcity. So I always come away from these conferences with a good dose of optimism for the future.
I think for most of us in the industry, we've realized that just a few years ago, a dozen years ago, 10 years ago, water was kind of the occasional news story, right, Shana? And today, water is the news, right? You can't turn on a TV or a radio show or listen to a podcast without the subject coming up. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I love to see it because I think it's something that we've done a good job in the water industry of just making everything run so smoothly that no one's really paying attention. And in general, I feel like people in the industry aren't necessarily the greatest at marketing what they're doing and how impactful it really is. And so that's what I love about the water report, is that I'm able to highlight experts and to talk about and to share the work that they're doing in a broad platform across all of the different water sectors, so that people can learn from each other, because we have these silos in water where we specialize in one specific topic, which makes sense in a lot of ways, but also there's so much opportunity for us to learn from each other. And that was actually something that was discussed quite often at the ACE conference. How do we get this line of communication across all of these different sectors? And I feel passionately that this report, the water report, that's how I used it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for others to learn from water lawyers about federal or regional lawsuits that can have long-standing impacts, and also at the same time learn or hear from the environmental point of view and learn about nature-based solutions and how partnerships are being leveraged to achieve multiple benefits. Or something I'm really passionate about is sharing the tribal point of view and perspective, and really understanding the challenges that they face in settling water rights, and talk about the innovative solutions that they're coming up with for their lands. And at the same time, we hear from university researchers and government agencies, and everyone's looking for creative solutions, and whatever that may be, through tech or through education or through policy. But I really value the opportunity to share the great work that's being done on a broad spectrum.
Well, the AWWA does a great job in doing those with their conferences and symposia. But I don't know if you had a chance to ever meet or work with Sue Mossberg.
Not yet, no.
She's an awesome person, runs the California Nevada division, and does excellent. I like technology, and I know in one of your recent articles you talked about decarbonizing water and some new technology, as you put it earlier, nature-based. Can you give our listeners a little information about that?
Sure. I was really excited about this article. It was featured in our June issue, which was released last Friday, so it's very new. It was released on Friday, June 14th, and so it's relatively new. And the reason that we're talking about decarbonizing water, and this is a phrase that I've started to hear more and more come up during conversations about solutions. We know that energy and water are inextricably connected. And we want to move away from fossil fuels, and we're trying to reduce carbon on a nationwide scale and on a local scale. But we're realizing that to address some of the water quality challenges that we're facing and water scarcity challenges and moving water to where it's needed, there might be more energy associated with that treatment and movement. So it's really critical that we look into new innovative techniques to try and reduce the carbon footprint of the water industry, which I have learned, recently that it is more impactful than the airline and the shipping industry combined, which is pretty wild to think about. So one of the solutions that very smart people have come up with is creating a new methodology to leverage carbon markets to increase funding for nature-based solutions by selling carbon credits on the markets so that we can improve water quality at the source. Utilities have a really big challenge in trying to treat water, and if the water that they're getting is increasingly degraded, whether that's coming from, non-point solution pollution, or if it's coming as a result of wildfires, for example. I'm sure you've had a lot of people talking about that on your show, and the impacts in California and in the West. And if we get water at utilities that is really, really poor quality, then it takes a lot of energy and resources to clean that. So one of the ways that people have thought about kind of switching this thinking up is to, let's improve the way that we are treating water, and let's address the quality at the source using nature-based solutions, and then we get cleaner water, and we end up using less carbon to treat that water, and then those credits can be sold, and we are able to leverage that to get an influx of funding from the private sector, which I think it just makes a whole lot of sense. And so having improved methodologies to measure what that would look like is obviously critical to having an accurate estimate of how much carbon is saved and how much funding that represents. But you can learn a lot about this from case studies, and I'm really excited because this article talks about projects that are actually happening, boots on the ground in Colorado with utilities who are looking to use these sort of innovative techniques.
Okay, Shauna, so another question that I have for you, it comes again from the articles on the website. And by the way, we'll talk about the website here in a little bit, give you more of a chance to discuss that. But decarbonation was a good article. I read that one. Another one, though, is all about the infrastructure, the water infrastructure in the United States, right? And all the stuff that's going on. And, as you said, we've had lots and lots of guests on here talking about the water crisis, or crises, I guess we should use the plural for that. And in particular, in reference to the aging infrastructure, especially here in our country, but we've talked to folks in other countries as well. We're aware, Rob and I, through the article we read on your website, that there's a report from the National Infrastructure Advisory Council. It's a 2023 report, I think, and it kind of goes through a lot of these challenges and even suggests a pathway forward. Would like to get your input, if you will, for our listeners on the subject of critical infrastructure in the U.S.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, this was a very interesting report, and I think it captured a lot of the different challenges that are related to infrastructure in the US right now. There's been studies from the American Water Works Association that estimates that most of the nation's existing drinking water pipes must be repaired or replaced before 2040. So this is going to dramatically increase costs to utilities and to their customers. The article or the report also goes into some other related challenges, such as the fragmentation of systems and jurisdictions that we have. There are many different types of water providers. There are many different rules and boundaries that must be followed. And, coming up with solutions that cross those boundaries, as we know, is very challenging and very complicated and requires a lot of partnerships. And all around, these increasing costs of water due to replacing the infrastructure is going to have some social justice impacts. The report talks about how they can find different ways to fund and support those who are disproportionately impacted, like marginalized and low-income communities, by the affordability issue that's going to come with all of this replacement of infrastructure. So we've seen chronic underfunding over the past couple of decades, and we've got a pretty low rating in our infrastructure right now. So I love to see the influx of funding coming for things like lead replacement, lead and copper, and PFAS treatment. That was also discussed quite a lot. But the other challenge besides just water quality is also water supply, and how climate change and changing weather systems can impact infrastructure, whether that means that there is a lot more water all at once, right? If these rain events are getting more extreme and the infrastructure that exists often doesn't have the capacity to meet the water flows associated with these new megastorms that we're seeing. So sometimes we have the issue of too much water, and then also obviously the issue of not having enough water, and even our giant storage facilities like Lake Mead and Lake Powell, we're seeing the consequences of, even those aren't large enough to keep the water in the bank, so to speak, during the entire period of extended drought. So the report really talks about how all of these different challenges work together. And finally, one thing that they mention is workforce. There's what everyone's calling the silver tsunami. Everyone's retiring, and there's not enough people to replace those who are retiring. So there's a big push to invest in the future generations of the workforce so that we have people to address all of these challenges moving forward. But a lot of the solutions discussed in this report talk about, better data, how we can better measure what's coming. A lot of this report also talks about better data and how we can model for future weather patterns, which will help us plan, because right now it is very difficult to adjust so quickly. And then funding, investment in sustainable solutions and grants and technology that can help us better understand and leverage the data that we have. So I think that's a real high level overview, but the report is available online, and I think it does a great job of saying, in a lot of ways, what everybody in the water industry kind of knows are the challenges. And then what's exciting is to see that on a federal scale, that people are looking to implement new solutions and to prioritize sustainable solutions for the water sector.
Yeah, your point on people leaving, I think within the last 3-4 years, we started seeing a gray wave in the water industry. And, going and looking for people new is a challenge. I hope the universities do a good job, and the public water districts and such do a lot to promote the industry of how you can make really good money. And it's a long-term career. So I hope that helps fill the gap that's actually starting to go right now. But one of the things I was very impressed with the broad breadth of topics that you cover. I was really interested and enjoyed the one that you did, I think it was in March, and talking about the central irrigation. the article talked about one water and one health. Can you kind of describe that for our listeners so they can understand what that means?
Sure thing, Rob. And also, I just wanted to mention, as far as the water resource or the water point about the workforce,
Yes.
there is a lot of really interesting, innovative solutions, like innovation hubs that are springing up across the U.S. And we had an article about one of those that's in Georgia, and it's a really interesting model where they do try to engage the universities, and they also have like on-site testing that's available, and they build this capacity for the future, which I just think is really critical. And so I'm hoping to see more of these come up in the West, because I agree it's a serious challenge. But to your point about the other article on the Central Arizona irrigation districts, this is a complicated one. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It's a lot about the legal structures that these irrigation districts represent. So as a result of the shortages that we're seeing in the Colorado River, agricultural land is being fallowed, right? There is just not enough water to go around. And with the prior appropriation system, first in time, first in right, those who don't have high priority rights have, in some cases, like in Arizona, completely lost access to water under the Colorado River system. So in these cases where people no longer have water to irrigate, we're left with this weird conundrum where there's actually quasi-governmental organizations called irrigation districts, which are legally classified as corporations, and they have a fiduciary responsibility to their members. And they were set up, to enter into complex contracts with like the United States or with the Bureau of Reclamation so that they can deliver and distribute and apportion water for the lands under their district. But we're seeing that the situation where now they don't have any water to move, the asset is possibly stranded. They were responsible for the irrigation infrastructure, but now we don't know what's going to happen next if this infrastructure is no longer functional. So the article sort of dives into some of the complexities of these legal agreements and also like what this means for tax zoning and land classification. And it sort of focuses on explaining the situation that is existing, not really answering anything, but also just raising the question of what comes next, but also what opportunities may lie in leveraging these quasi-governmental agencies, possibly for water solutions or possibly for land transitions. It's a thinker, this one, because it doesn't really talk about what it means, but it raises the point that this is something that we're going to have to consider moving forward.
Well, Shana, so many of our guests in the past have been on and discussed these, very, very same issues on our show before. So what I'm going to do here is kind of shift for our listeners a little bit and kind of take a forward-looking view, if you will, and maybe you can help us answer a couple of questions for what you see as trends, right? Not just for this year, but the year after that. And I know there are many. We were just talking about the aging infrastructure and decentralized water systems, so I'm sure that's one. But if you were to kind of take, the top handful, 1, 2, 3, or 4 or so of those, what would they be in your view?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I think for now, I'll just focus on a couple, and the first one I have to say is PFAS and lead. And the reason why is because, gosh, this is going to be so expensive to handle. I think we have a pretty good understanding of what this challenge is now. I'm sure your listeners have heard the PFAS terms many times. Am I correct?
Yes, you are.
Should I give an overview? Okay, yeah. I figured that had been something you talked about. So, we can detect PFAS, and it's estimated 45% of the tap water in the United States. These chemicals are prolific. They're everywhere. They're found in everything, and they stick around for a really long time. So water, it's estimated only 20% of our exposure of PFAS comes from water, and the rest of it is we're exposed through our clothes and our furniture and the air, even food. And we had, we heard a lot about PFAS at the ACE conference, there was a whole educational track dedicated to this topic, and the rooms were packed, I'll tell you that much, because it's on everyone's mind, the legal implications for this chemical and how it is in everything is going to have a real big impact on the water industry. We see large lawsuits and settlements coming through with some of the manufacturers like DuPont, 3M, BASF. But now we're also seeing smaller lawsuits from states, for example, because in a lot of ways we're just the PFAS aren't going away. So we're kind of trying to move them around and figure out where to put them next and figure out who's going to be responsible for the cleanup next, because they are so difficult to get rid of. And one of the reasons for that is because now they're classified as hazardous substances under the Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act. That's a mouthful. You might recognize it as CERCLA or Superfund, but designating a couple of these chemicals as hazardous substances allows the EPA to use the Superfund framework to address PFAS contamination, and that has real hard legal implications. So, utilities are concerned about this, manufacturers are concerned about this, and it's just going to be a very difficult, and it's going to take a long time for us to figure out what to do with PFAS. So lead and PFAS, I think lead is more straightforward. We know that all these pipes need to be replaced, which is also super costly. But those two points for, water quality have been top of mind, and I think will stay top of mind for a lot of water industry professionals moving forward. So that's one. That was a mouthful. And then I think the next one would probably be the energy water nexus. So some people hate the term nexus at this stage because it's been around for a while, but we know that, that these two things are really connected. And if you use more water, you're probably using more energy. And if your water's bad quality, like I talked about before, you're going to use more energy. And if the energy isn't coming from a renewable source, it's creating carbon. And so trying to figure out how to address this interrelation in a more effective way, I think, is going to be more and more important, especially as we approach some of the critical deadlines for emission standards and for CO2 and for carbon that have been established on a federal level. So I actually have an article coming out in a couple of months here talking about some pumped hydro storage projects. I've seen an influx of these types of projects, which I think is a really interesting solution, and a way that we can reduce the amount of possibly non-renewable energy sources being used to move water. So look for that one. That should be coming out in the next couple of months, which I'm excited about. Third,
one more?
I would probably, oh yeah, go ahead. One more. Yep. I would say the Colorado River Basin is probably a pretty big one to talk about. There's not a whole lot. We're sort of at a standstill right now. Everyone's waiting on the edge of their seats to see what happens next, but we have the end of our current management systems coming to a close in 2026. So post 2026 operations of the Colorado River is going to have clearly a very big impact on how states manage their water resources and what that means for their total supplies, and also, the efforts to reduce demands. I have a lot of articles about the Colorado River Basin and the states who are within the Colorado River Basin. So I think we're all expecting the new proposed plan that's supposed to be coming out any month now, really, to see what that looks like. Will obviously have a huge impact on how water is being managed. And I have an article, hopefully a series of articles I'm working on, sharing the perspectives of the different basins, so the upper basin and the lower basin. So in the next couple months, we'll have the upper basin perspective and the story of climate change up there, where they don't have as much storage like we have down in Arizona or California, where we get to leverage Lake Mead to sort of bank our water and save it for the future in a lot of ways. So lots to talk about in the Colorado River Basin, but how this all plays out politically and also with the operational decisions is going to be huge.
Well, Shana, Rob, and I are certainly well aware of all the issues around the Colorado River Basin. We focus on that segment on our California Water News segment all the time. So we know how complex it is. But one of the things we got to deal with right now is we're getting close to the end of our time. We've got to relegate our minutes here to NBC. But I just want to give you a chance to tell our guests and our listeners a little bit about where they can go to get more information on your organization, on the Water Report. What's the best way for them to find out more?
Sure. And thank you, Chris, for having me on today. I think there's a lot of similarities in our approach to sharing information, which I greatly appreciate, and really to talk about the different perspectives in water and to bridge those silos that I talked about, to get the big picture and to accelerate solutions. So if you would like to learn more about subscribing, this is a monthly publication that gets delivered right to your email inbox, or also can be printed out for you to read with a coffee. It is in depth, so a lot of people like to take notes and sit down and spend some time taking a deep dive into some of these challenges and solutions. But if you'd like to learn more about how to subscribe, you can go to our website at www.thewaterreport.com.
Yeah, thanks, Shana. And listeners, take note here. I'm telling you, if you want to see relevant, abundant content, go to Shana's website. It is terrific. And I know Shana, you don't do it alone. You've got lots of other contributors and stuff that give that its unique flavor. And it is unique indeed. So listeners, I encourage you to go to the Water Report website, just as Shana described. Take a look for yourself. Rob, any closing thoughts from you?
No, I wish we had hours to spend. Maybe she can come back and fill up a little bit more. There's so many things that are happening, as you said at the beginning of the show, about water. It's in the news every day, like the brouhaha between Mexico and the U.S. And, one feeds one place in the summer, the other country feeds it back to us in the winter. We're not getting our share of water. It's stopped. And there's so many topics to talk about. Produced water, what's happening in New Mexico and all over the country. I mean, there's so much between the technologies and legislation and people fighting for water rights or trading water rights or leasing them out to other people. You can spend your whole life just talking about water. So, and as Chris and I always say, everybody likes green. Well, guess what? You can't have green unless you have blue. So that's the way we look at it. So Shana, thank you very much. Please promise you'll come back and we can continue our discussion on some other topics. It's great to have you. And you got a great.
I'd love to.
You got a great water report that we love to read.
Thanks for coming on, Shana.
I'd love to.
Well, what do you think, Chris?
That was terrific. I tell you, we've talked about it afterwards, and you and I consider Shana and the Water Report to be a colleague, right? Education, awareness, providing a balance. Information to all of us who are committed to water.
Well, education and knowledge is going to make everything get better down the road, and you can't stop it. We need to have more of it, and I'm glad we have a venue that we can produce that and bring other people on the show to do the same. Our mission is to talk about water in every sense of the capacity you can think of, and by bringing all people in, it's a great way to see what's going on.
Yeah, I want our listeners to know that if you want to share this today's show, tomorrow this show will go on podcast just about anywhere you get your content. Go get it and share it with people you know.
All right, so everybody, hope you had a great week. Hope you have a great weekend coming up, and we will talk to you next week. And the most important thing that we always have to tell you, please help keep our planet blue, because if you like green, you got to have blue. Good night, everybody.
NBC News on KCAA Loma Linda, sponsored by Teamsters Local 1932, protecting the future of working families. Teamsters1932.org.
NBC News Radio, I'm Brian Shook. President Biden introduced Ukrainian President Zelensky as President Putin. He tried to make light of the mistake soon after and made the proper introduction.
President Putin is going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are.